What makes a Collect-A-Thon platformer fun? I get this question a lot when I talk about games that I enjoy with friends, and there's often times where my friends will tell me that there's close to no point for the games to even exist due to the tediousness of collecting items. And that honestly makes me sad, though I can see where they're coming from. How do you make a game about collecting a large amount of items fun, and more to the point, how does one make the player want to collect these items and complete the game? Well, before we could really answer those questions, we need a basis for what a Collect-A-Thon platformer is. Since not all games with hidden collectibles can be defined as a Collect-A-Thon, we need to be able to make a clear distinction between a platformer and a Collect-A-Thon platformer. Though, we need a starting point in order to accurately make distinctions visible. So, for the sake of this video, I'm going to pull two titles that I feel will accurately help me in my quest. These titles being Banjo-Kazooie and Super Mario Sunshine. So let's boot up the first level on both games and see what we can find. Banjo-Kazooie drops me into a world that's cleverly designed for what the game wants you to do. As soon as the level loads, it gives you two potential paths, one to the top of the hill and the other going past the river. This immediately gives the player a choice of how to approach the level. The game explains as you proceed that music notes and jiggies must be collected to open new worlds, and get higher into Gruntilda's castle. Right from the get-go, all the jiggies and music notes are available to collect, and you can collect them in the order you so desire. Super Mario Sunshine, however, places me into a level select before I'm even able to enter the world I've unlocked. Once you enter the world, the game gives you a general nudge in the right direction with its camera, focusing on your objective. Once you've gained control of your character, you see that you're placed on a very linear path. This path is designed to take you up to the top of the hill and give you a view of the world, so you can get a better sense of where you need to go. Exploring the area for more shine sprites in the level will hold no value, as the game only loads a particular set of items with each level you select. This is the first major difference. Banjo-Kazooie presents a much more non-linear experience than Super Mario Sunshine does. While one game is much more focused on collecting the items spread throughout the levels, the other is focused on making its way to the end. Speaking of making it to the end of the level, Banjo-Kazooie's levels never technically end. When you collect a Jiggy, the game doesn't thrust Banjo out of the world he's currently in, rather it gives you a small sense of accomplishment for each Jiggy collected by doing a little dance. I believe this was done as more of a design choice than anything else. If the game kept thrusting you out of the level each time you collected a Jiggy, you would have to return to the world roughly 10 times or more, and that would be incredibly tedious. However, that's exactly what Super Mario Sunshine does. Each world in Super Mario Sunshine has roughly around 11 shine sprites. Before you can collect all of them, you have to exit and re-enter the world roughly 9 times or more before you've collected everything, which, in the context of how each level plays out in Super Mario Sunshine, I can understand this decision. Some of the levels drastically change the environment, and it would be easier to load in a specific set of things rather than try to load it all within one go. However, the design choice is also significant enough to make it a point altogether. When you grab what should be a collectible and the level ends, the collectible is no longer a collectible. It's turned into the goal flag from Super Mario Bros. You reach it to end the level and it shows how far you've gotten in the game. Nothing else really. In fact, if you go a step further into Super Mario Sunshine, you'll realize that the game doesn't even trigger events based on how many shine sprites you've collected. Rather, it's based on what specific levels you completed. The final stage where you go to the volcano to defeat Bowser triggers only after you do the Shadow Mario missions on each world of the game, which is the 7th level of each world. Through this logic, multiplying the number of worlds times 7 should give us the total amount of shine sprites we should need to proceed, correct? Therefore, the total amount of shine sprites you would need to get to the final boss is equal to 49. However, during my playthrough of Super Mario Sunshine, I didn't manage to unlock the level until I got to 61 shine sprites. My 61st shine sprite being the final Shadow Mario mission I hadn't completed. That shows a lot of the linearity that Super Mario Sunshine presents with its gameplay. While I won't say that a linear game is a bad game, I will say that it's kind of hard to call it a Collect-A-Thon when what you collect doesn't necessarily influence the game to progress. In a game like Banjo-Kazooie, the order in which you gain the jiggies or music notes doesn't necessarily matter. It only matters how many you've obtained. This is written on the doors and puzzles all over Gruntilda's lair. Where a door can imply that you need 180 music notes to open it, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to collect all the music notes on the worlds prior to that door. An example being collecting all the music notes in Treasure Trove Cove and Click Clock Wood, yet completely bypassing Clanker's Cavern because I don't like that level. The point is, Collect-A-Thons probably have one of the most unique ways of offering players a non-linear experience, where the player can choose what level to play and how to proceed with the game to make their own adventure. So, with that being said, the thing that makes Collect-A-Thons fun would be the sense of freedom you can have from being able to do your objectives in whichever order you so desire, being able to explore the worlds given to you and make your own adventure from it, giving you an experience completely unique to your playthrough, as the chances are, you don't play the game exactly as someone else had. Though it still begs the question, how do you make the player want to collect many things that otherwise don't seem to do much more than simply progress the game? My answer is simply by making them interesting. A lot of the design in Collect-A-Thon platformers is hiding their collectibles from players and having them complete tasks or puzzles to unlock the collectible they need. Though, how they make the process of obtaining those collectibles interesting is ultimately what dictates whether it should be worth the player's time. If you've ever heard the saying, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey, then you know exactly what I'm referencing. Banjo-Kazooie, through all of its levels, has a very interesting way of collecting almost all of the Jiggies. My personal favorite being in Bubble Gloop Swamp, where you have to eat more little things than this guy to win. It's a simple minigame, but I enjoy it a lot. So with all this talk of the Collect-A-Thon, why haven't I talked about any modern day titles in this video? Well, the answer to that is simple as well. There aren't any. As interesting as subgenre Collect-A-Thon seem to be, it's even more intriguing how the genre itself seems to have faded from the gaming market, becoming almost like a ghost in this industry. It looms over the heads of many players, yet nobody out there wants to seem to satisfy this need for Collect-A-Thons. Well, almost nobody. We'll get into that later. My theory is this. As awesome as a genre Collect-A-Thons might have been, they were hard to produce and they took lots of effort. Through this process of making each individual collectible interesting to collect, as well as making the worlds large and entertaining to explore, they had to intricately weave the collectibles into the environment, which forced level structure to change as they added more puzzles. This ultimately resulted in many work hours and a load that just might not be sustainable for these developers to continue producing. The funny thing is, the closest thing to a modern day Collect-A-Thon that we potentially have is with the 3D Mario platformers. These games, however, have a linearity that is so incredibly noticeable that it's kind of hard to call them Collect-A-Thons. Nintendo, hear me out because I have an idea for you. If you could make game titles like Super Mario Sunshine a bit less linear simply by making all the levels available to you from the moment you unlock the world, you could have so much more potential in giving players a non-linear game. Make the games progress through collecting the shine sprites and have a limit for how much you need to beat the game. This, as well as giving the players a decent reward for completing the game 100%, would work wonders for your games and would make a lot of players happy. Though, with all this talk of a nearly dead subgenre, I would love to tell you that there is in fact a silver lining. That silver lining is A Hat in Time. A Hat in Time is an indie game that was initially funded on Kickstarter. The Kickstarter promises a 3D Collect-A-Thon platformer in the spirit of beloved Nintendo and Rare games from the N64 era. And by some of the footage I've seen from the game as of yet, I believe every word they've said. A Hat in Time shows a lot of promise. Ever since the game was funded on Kickstarter, I've been watching their Twitter feed for updates, and I'm glad I did. The game looks like it's coming along brilliantly, and it's something I'm personally going to pick up on release day. If not for the joy of playing a modern day Collect-A-Thon platformer, it's for the bliss of listening to the musical stylings of Grant Kirkhope himself, the music composer from Banjo-Kazooie. So far, the game is still in its alpha stage, though from the looks of it, I'm still impressed at how polished everything looks coming from a small indie team. While it may take a while for the game to get released, I'm confident that Gears for Breakfast will deliver an amazing product that will change the way developers look at the Collect-A-Thon. Collect-A-Thon platformers may have taken a dive since the N64 era, though I'm confident that in the years to come, we'll be seeing a bit more of this subgenre come back to life. This has been Afterthoughts, and thank you for watching.